Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette. And our special guest today, you know him, you love him, you watch him on French TV because he's better than the English TV. That's not a shot against Hockey Night in Canada, I'm just saying.
Thank you.
Pierre Houde. Pierre, welcome. Thank you
well,
so
thank
much
you
for
so
being
much.
here.
I feel so privileged, you know. I feel like a fresh cut prime of smoked meat in between two wonderful slices of bread.
two hanging hams. Thank you, Pierre. By the way, this is available for you to take home, which is the exciting
Well, thank you.
So, yeah.
I mean, even on the other side of the door, the smell is already great. So as soon
That's
as
how we attract people. Pierre.
Well, thank you.
So for people who don't know, and I don't imagine that's many, Pierre has been broadcasting Canadiens games since 1989. And most recently, congratulations, elected into the Hockey Hall of Fame in the Broadcasters Division.
The Foster Hewitt Memorial Prize, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah.
We're here to talk hockey.
Yes, we are.
In general, because this has been that kind of a season, despite the Canadiens' loss in Game 1. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you for your assessment. You've been watching this team for a long time.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the Martin St. Louis era, if we can, and how, I think for a lot of people, and I wonder if you're one of them, are surprised by how well a team this young has done as quickly as it has.
Yeah, you put it right, because on the long run, I was a very strong believer in that team very early in the process, including, of course, the captain, including all those young players coming on board. And people who know me know I have a very high level of admiration for Martin St. Louis. I think he was the perfect coach for the process to start with. And what is great is that success comes a bit earlier than expected. But then again, Aaron and Bill, this is sports. Sports is always in relation with your opponents, right?
Right.
So you have your own reality, and then you have your opponent's reality. And if the Rangers play up to par this season, well, maybe the Habs don't make the playoffs. And if Detroit develops the team at the expected rate, maybe the Habs are not in the playoffs. But this is what sports is all about. I also do Formula One, and Formula One is the same.
Exactly.
You're always growing your performance in relation with your opponent. So my conclusion is that they are right now at a place that they deserve, because they have made the necessary process to be there.
Would you call this a Cinderella run?
Yeah, kind of. Some people label them more the cardiac kids now because they basically dominate in the latter stage of a game in the third period. But yeah, I guess it's a Cinderella story, and just making the playoffs, and not even making the playoffs, the way they actually started that Cinderella story during the holidays.
Right.
Because I was with the team throughout the holidays. It was a brutal schedule. They were expected to lose almost all of their games, and there they went.
Took on the big boys too.
Starting the run, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a very nice way to put it. It is a Cinderella story.
You know, it's funny though. If you look at the campaign, you're talking about that brutal schedule at the time. Yeah. They reeled off wins against the best teams in the league.
Absolutely.
And ended up playing their worst hockey against the lower-ranked teams in the league. Never understood that.
They play to the level of their opponent.
It seems that way.
I think so. This is probably part of the growing process. The growing process is not only performing on the ice, it's also getting prepared mentally, individually and collectively, to a certain type of opponents. But there are some factors that actually led the team to this turnaround. The acquisition of Alexandre Carrier was unbelievable.
Yeah.
This team was weak on the right side, on the blue line, and Carrier came and stabilized the whole thing. We understand he's not a Norris Trophy, but at the same time, he's so calm, he's cool, he's composed. So this was one factor. The other factor was Jakub Dobeš. What a surprise he was. True. I mean, he was the main reason for the jump start in that brutal holiday trip starting in Florida against the Panthers.
That's a good point. And Montembeault too, to an extent.
Of course. But the arrival of Dobeš actually took off a little bit of pressure out of
what he ran? 5 wins in a row?
He did. And it was
killed off. People figured him out a little bit more, perhaps.
There you go. But yeah, you're right. And then he has to develop as a young goaltender. But at the same time, at that particular moment, he was the as I said, the jump start that the team needed, and he was right there at the start of this process.
I should point out that our buddy Pierre is not doing the playoffs because it's not RDS. TVL has the rights for the playoffs, so we're missing our favorite. We call him the professor in certain circles. By the way,
What's that going to be like for you not to be able to do this?
Well, it's the 11th year out of the 12-year deal, Aaron. So I got used to it.
Uh-huh.
It still hurts a little bit. Well, it hurts personally in the right way. I mean, as a passionate broadcaster, but it's been 11 years, so we've learned to cope with it. And it's this year maybe is a little bit harder because we were actually broadcasting the final games leading to the process, the magic of Demidov playing the second to last game, and the magic of the last Wednesday. It was, I mean, I've got goosebumps talking to you. This is probably right there in the top 5 of my most memorable hockey games.
The clinching the playoffs.
Yeah.
You should have felt the energy. At one point, I shut up for the last 60 seconds to let the viewers enjoy the ambiance. It was just pure magic. It reminded me of those great playoffs.
Can I take you back to 2010 when the Canadiens played the Capitals? Same situation, right? Best team.
A guy called Halak.
When Halak stood on his head, I mean, a performance that people still say may have been one of the best in NHL playoff hockey. You called it. You remember that series?
You read my mind, because if I put that on the top 5, it's right there with the 2010 run. And the 2010 run was so intense. It's one of the rare moments where I had to call portions of the game standing up. I was literally out of breath, sitting down, calling the game. And you probably saw me. I always kneel on my elbows, and I was out of breath sometimes. So I had to stand up in order to breathe efficiently and call the game. So it was close to that. Sidney Crosby's golden goal, of course, in Vancouver. Those are the highlights of my hockey run. But
you only had one Stanley Cup, though, 1993.
And it wasn't even me.
I know. That's what I was going to say. Like, so from you missed the magical run there from like the 60s and 70s with all those cups, and yet you've been denied.
Well, 93 was CBC French, of course.
Right, I remember.
And Hockey Night in Canada and La Soirée du Hockey.
Right.
93 was actually the start of RDS broadcasting playoff games. And we ended up calling an amazing series, Toronto against Detroit.
Right.
Both teams were in the Western Conference at the time. And Toronto had probably the best team in the Western Conference. And they were so hateable and lovable at the same time, because Pat Burns was the coach,
right,
and Doug Gilmour was there, Wendell Clark, Sylvain Lefebvre, the cat Félix Potvin was the goalie. Detroit had an amazing team as well. It was a 7-game overtime type of the conclusion, and so we had our own good playoff run. And I've called, I guess, 12 Stanley Cup finals, but none of them involving the Habs.
Breaks our hearts.
If I go back to this team this year, and the idea, and I remember watching press conferences where we were announcing these kids coming up, and Nick Suzuki is the captain of the team, and Cole Caulfield, exciting fans. You look at the beginning of the season to where we are now, right, in the playoffs. Was there a point, like a turning point in the year, besides that schedule, when they had so many games back to back to back, that you thought this team can actually get this far?
I'll start with Alexandre Carrier.
Really?
Although I don't want to put him on a too high of a pedestal.
Late in the year for Alexandre Carrier.
Well, it was in it was before halfway point. So I think this was a turnaround, and it's not only the player himself. I think it was the move by management. It was hard to find Justin Barron a right fit. He was still considered a young player. We had probably, in the fans' mind, too many of those young players. Carrier came and was like, as I said, solving one problem, but at the same time, the move by management was probably perceived like, hey,
by the players.
This is that kind of a move that proves to you you're at the other level of rebuilding. I always say, Aaron and Bill, rebuilding is a necessary process, and it has to start with it has to start with spots to fill with no names. when you start putting names on those spots to fill, you can move to the other level. And we do have names now with Suzuki and Caulfield and Slavkovsky and all those young players and upcoming players that are doing really well in Laval right now, the best team in the NHL. So,
AHL, yeah.
So my point is, you have basically reached that level. And then the other turning point is when the captain went to see Kent Hughes and says,
Don't trade Evans.
Don't trade anybody.
Yeah,
Keep us together.
right.
I mean, keep us together. Let us prove that this team is solidly knit. We can go somewhere, and we'll prove it to you. And look at the way the captain plays since that meeting. He's unbelievable.
What about Hudson, Lane Hudson?
I mean,
Did you see that coming? Did you have any idea
Yeah.
he was this good?
well, I mean, I heard a lot about him, Aaron. But honestly, I wasn't there, and I saw some highlights like you guys. That's the most I've seen from him. But you know what? I'm old enough to have enjoyed Guy Lafleur in my best fan years.
Us too.
As a teenager, and we're about the same age anyway. And he's probably the most exciting player I've seen since Guy Lafleur, although he's a defenseman. And we'll
Really,
see.
eh? You put him up there?
I think so.
Wow, that's interesting.
Well, I think he's highly gifted, at least
For a little guy, too.
for a little guy too.
Yeah.
And he's so clever. And calling 3,500 games brings you to a very scientific pattern. It's always a three-step thing. The first step is recognizing the situation. The second step is deciding what you're going to do. Third step is performing the first two steps.
Right.
This, when you do that over and over and over again, it takes a very, very, very special person, a very special athlete in order to do that. And he's showing that almost every damn presence
Yeah.
on the ice.
Really, it's kind of
pretty-
interesting.
Is he up there like Bobby Orr style, do you think, as an offensive defenseman? or-
well,
That's a big stretch.
It's a big stretch. I mean, I've seen...
It's only his first season. I mean, we have a ways to go.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't know if there will ever be an equivalent to
Yeah.
Bobby Orr, Aaron.
Still see that picture of him horizontal.
Oh yeah,
through
the
the air.
famous
Yeah, yeah.
dive, against St. Louis.
Yeah.
I think that he will always be Bobby Orr. I haven't seen Doug Harvey play at his top level. My dad told a lot about Doug Harvey. I think he was the first to create that kind of play from a defenseman. But we'll see where Hudson goes. I mean, he's only 21.
Yeah.
He's just starting, but his maturity and his constance is amazing. You can do that from time to time. Doing it over and over again
that's true.
for more than 20 minutes a game in your first NHL season is just amazing.
And what about Demidov?
Well,
You got to experience him for a game or two?
yeah,
Two?
that was what. And by the way, I liked my call on this goal because
Yes.
it was very predictable.
I liked it too, yeah.
And you're just hoping that he's going to score
Yeah.
because you're ready to yell it out. But if it doesn't
move.
happen,
What a geek.
yeah, it was a great move. I think he's got what it takes. He has some of those Hudson qualities that I talked about. The other thing I like about him is that he's only 19, but he seems developed in terms of muscular,
Physical
Yeah.
presence. Yeah.
He seems to be developed at his very young age. It's like opposite to Slavkovsky, who even at 20, 21 seems to have to grow a little
Right,
bit more.
yeah.
Demidov is so bulky; he's already right there. So I think he's going to be an incredible.
Were you
kid.
surprised by the Canadiens' move? I mean, a lot have been talked about Demidov, best player in Russia, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Kid's 19 years old. You throw him right into the lineup as you head into the playoffs. Not typically a thing the Canadiens will have done over the years, right?
Yeah, but I mean, this is part of the process. Of course, for some U.S. players, and because of the CBA, the agent will say, and it has nothing to do with European players. So it's understandable for Lane Hudson, and we've seen that also from other players in the past. They want to play one game to get 1 year out of their CBA status, free agent status eventually. In the case of Demidov, I would say there was probably an open spot there. There was an open spot. And
But the
so-
expectation level, there's a lot of hype attached to Demidov already.
Yeah.
Justified in your opinion?
Well, what's justifiable or not? I mean, fans are fans. I've learned not only to cope, but to appreciate and to live with this crazy passion we have in this city. And you know what I like about this young core of players is that they are not judgmental about it. They appreciate it.
Right.
I mean, how many times we heard in the past, "Oh, I don't want to play in Montreal. I cannot go and do my grocery shopping." By the way, who does? What hockey players goes regularly to IGA or Metro? You know what I'm saying? So we're way past this now. Now they endorse this passion, and when you see those smiles from players after electrical moments like we've witnessed the last couple of weeks, I think they are genuinely happy to play here. So yeah, in a way, maybe it's a bit too much. But then again, what is too
Like,
much?
who would have been the last person to come up to the Canadiens that fans would have gotten this worked up about? Someone new coming into the lineup.
Well,
Been a while.
Well, since Guy Lafleur, I think it was mostly goaltenders.
Kovalev, people like that.
Yeah, good point. But for a short period of
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But very good point. Kovalev is a good example. PK, in a way.
But there was
Short period of time.
disharmony in the room.
Yeah. But PK is
To put
PK.
it mildly.
To put it mildly. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we all kind of know about it. But I think that it mostly happened with goaltenders.
Yeah.
It was Patrick come in 86.
good point.
They were not
Carey.
supposed to win in 86. They were not supposed to win in 93. They won both.
Go
with
back
Patrick.
to Ken Dryden way back when.
Well, yeah, but Ken was part of the whole thing.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the home of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen. You mentioned Patrick Waugh, so of course, was that your first game? When Patrick Waugh with that 11-1 game against Detroit?
Right.
That was my first game in English.
In English.
Because I was calling.
He drew the short straw for his first English
I
game.
was calling that game on CJAD.
So it's your fault.
Weren't you part of that trip? The
No.
50th anniversary?
No.
Can I tell the story
Sure.
for those who don't know?
Sure, go.
I was in line to be the play-by-play announcer in Denver. When Quebec moved to Denver, Pierre Lacroix, by coincidence, we met in a flight out of Toronto. He said, "Come and sit with me." And he says, it was middle of summer, 95. So he says, "We're moving to Denver, and I don't like..."
So just for this is the Nordique now?
The Nordiques
Moving to Colorado.
that were about to
Right.
move to Denver.
Okay.
And he says, "I'm not very sure about the play-by-play announcers that are looked at." And he says, "You're bilingual." And I said, "Yeah, maybe not 100%, but..." I said, "Maybe enough." He says, "Would you consider moving to Denver and be our first TV play-by-play announcer?" I said, "Well, let me talk to Mrs. And Michelle, my daughter, was 6 months old, so it was the right timing on that regard." Anyway, I was considered for the job. It didn't materialize like early September, and it came to be known in the newspapers. So Mario Brisebois of Le Journal de Montréal wrote a long story about it. So it became known that I would have maybe worked in the English language. So comes that CJAD 50th anniversary. Charter flight to, I think, the Bahamas. Flight is supposed to come back early
Demidov
Saturday.
Sisto story.
And
Oh, yes, I remember.
so the flight is supposed to come back around noon, and there they are stuck with a broken airplane in the Bahamas. And Dick Irvin was working Hockey Night in Canada at the time, so he could not perform the play-by-play announcing. So they were desperately trying to reach me because I was, according to them, I was the only hope. And this was before the cellular era. So they were phoning home and home and home. I got the phone call at 5:15 p.m. and Dino is all crazy at the other end. He says, go to the forum, please. You're the only hope. I says, "Well, okay, I'm gonna go." So, and there was a snowstorm here as well. So I drove. I think I got there like at 6:20, and we were on the air at 6:45 for the pre-game show. And my colorman was Jim Corsi. Jimmy, it was so nice and so courteous to me. And there we were, 6:45, bang, right there on the air. No security net, no safety net. And so this is only one half of the story. The other half of the story is that I got to call that crazy game with no TV monitor.
Oh.
So we couldn't see exactly what was going on. And Jimmy had those, like opera-style binoculars.
Yeah.
It's the only thing he had in order to try to understand what was going on at the Montreal bench. And it's only when I got back home and watched Le Téléjournal that I understood the immensity of what just happened. I mean, Patrick Roy just pulled himself out of the team.
So you didn't see him and Ronald Corey, the look, or any of that while you were
and
calling
no
it?
monitor.
Or Mario,
Right.
yeah.
Wow.
That was an incredible moment.
Yeah, it
So
was.
it was your first of how many games you called in English, too? Yeah.
The other one was on TV. The other one was Boxing Day. The same hockey year. Well, Boxing Day 1996, actually. TSN was one announcer short because of the Juniors. And Gord Kotler, their producer, was a good friend of mine already. He said, I think you're ready. Would you consider?
You are, for sure.
So it was the Habs. It was in Pittsburgh. It was in Mario's territory. I got to work with Gary Green. The late Darren Dutition was so nice to me as a host. So that was a great experience. Good reviews. I didn't think I was that good, but all in all, I think we had
baptism
good
by
reviews.
fire. But Pierre, what I always like to point out is a friend, Pierre, and I used to call him the professor because there are people that, like I grew up learning French on the street, René Le Cavalier, calling play-by-play, and of course I listen all the time, prefer to listen to you like so many other Anglos. You have no idea how many Anglophones in the city have told me how they learned to speak French listening to you call a game.
Yeah.
So you've done more for the French language than amongst, and it's true. I mean, it's unbelievable how, I mean, your whole approach to it and people follow and understand it. How do you feel about that honor?
It's so heartwarming, and I've got some stories that are so touching. My daughter, with her mother, they were in line in Disney World for a ride, and there was a family in front of them from Calgary, and they start to talk to each other, and the father says, "Well, I wish I could speak French," but he says, "I only know one phrase in French."
I know
It's "Et le but." And my daughter said, "It's my dad, it's my dad." There's also somebody that when he was young, when he was a kid, he wanted to play hockey and he wanted to play rate la cible. He misses the target. That's one of my call when for a miss shot. I say il rate la cible. He misses the target. So he say, "Where do you want to play, Sean?" He says, "I want to play rate la cible." So for him, Rate la Cible was a goaltender. So
It'd be a great name for a music guy in Quebec. Rock, or instead of Rock Le Cib would be good.
Rock le Cid, yeah. Well, when I was a DJ at Siquat, would have been good. But yeah, this is so heartwarming. I you know what? I just love doing my job in the French language because I think there are so many opportunities to call the same play in various ways. This is what René taught me when I had to work with him. He said, you'll see how be diversified in your way of calling things. Just enjoy, and the French language brings that, And so I'm
going to ask you, but that's interesting. You just brought this up. Who did you admire with respect to how did you get into play-by-play? Did you model yourself after somebody you had already heard, somebody you liked, like a style? How did that happen?
I guess René, of course, because René Le Cavalier was the first voice I've ever heard calling a hockey game in French. So René, of course, is what? The equivalent is Danny Gallivan.
Danny
probably,
Gallivan.
right?
But like osmosis, that's the guy you heard all the time.
Or
Yeah.
Foster Hewitt. That got me off Foster Hewitt very quick listening to René Le Cavalier.
probably. But I think René and Danny probably had the same same kind of impact.
And a huge mutual respect for one
Absolutely.
another. Yeah.
Both of them were very good friends. Richard Garneau was another one, Aaron, because I was a big fan of the CFL at the time and big fan of the Olympics because of my father. My father led my late brother and I to be Olympic aficionados. Richard was always the voice of track and field. He was the voice of the Alouettes for a while, but mostly voice of the Olympics and track and field. So he was another idol on another ground, But I'm spoiled to have been growing up listening to those unbelievable announcers. But the same is true in English. I mean, as much as Danny Gallivan was there, I was a big fan of Bob Cole, and I would say a good friend of
For your
Bob.
friendly, yeah.
Yeah. I think that some others, Don Whitman, were voices that my brother and I used to impersonate. So I guess very early in our youth, we were exposed to both languages and the great announcers in both languages.
It's kind of interesting because I know your background and it wasn't sports at all because you started off you were a DJ, you were interested in music, and that's how you're in radio, and so you were trying to do what a lot of people were trying to do, but sports wasn't the obvious first choice for you.
No, it wasn't. Actually, radio was my weekend job.
Right.
I was about to become a chartered accountant.
That's right.
Can you believe that?
Good call. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But
your accountant appreciated it too, probably.
Well, yeah, he took a lot of money from me.
Yeah.
But I was studying at Hautes Études Commerciales at University of Montreal, and for me, radio was that's a great student gig, and when it's done, I'm going to be leaving. So I took a decision to specialize in marketing instead of accounting. And it led me to amazing gigs. I mean, beside being an announcer, I was also marketing director. I got to understand this other side of the business. I got also to go to accept the Grand Prix of Canada GM position in the early '80s. So sports came as just by accident. I was on the air at Sequoia on a weekend, and the NFL producer for CBC French happened to be listening to my show, and he heard me talking about sports. He managed to reach me and says, "I'm looking for fresh color man or fresh analyst for my NFL gig. And do you like football?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a big football freak." And he said, "Well, we'll have you on board. Wow. Next game." Okay, let's give it a try. So it was 1978, and by coincidence, my co-analyst turned out to be Yvon Pedneau.
Oh my God!
Who would become my first partner in crime for the NHL on RDS.
It's a great story.
One thing led to another afterward.
Okay, I would ask. Go ahead.
We would be remiss not to talk about your brother Paul, who recently passed away. Mm-hmm. Also a giant on the Franco more radio, but nonetheless one of the greats. And he just died very recently. And I know you two guys were very, very close.
Yeah.
And
I guess we were close. We were close the right way.
Yeah.
It's not easy being two brothers starting the same career at the same time, even though Paul was 3 years older than me. We both started in 1975. Paul in May, myself in August. But I would say, Bill, we actually grew closer and closer all the time. And I mean, you have no control in your fatality and when is your life going to end. Paul was very unlucky because the big illness he had nothing to do with his passing. It was another occurrence.
Right.
So that you learn to cope with. I think what is really sad is that we were getting close to the point where we desperately wanted to work together.
That's what
for the first time in our lives, after almost 50 years of a career. And we felt so heartwarmed because the public, the listeners, asked us to do that. So we were trying to figure out how we could do that. And obviously, in hindsight, it wasn't meant to be. Yeah. So,
but the fact that both of you achieved fame in totally different directions is also pretty remarkable.
It is pretty remarkable. A lot of people thought that we would be vice versa, that Paul would be the sports announcer.
Really?
And I would be doing comedy impersonations, which was Paul's early place in this business. Of course, he became more of a serious radio host in the latter stage of his career, but it turned out the opposite. So, and Paul became one of my number one fan at the end, and I was, of course, a big fan of his as well.
So we need to wrap up. I want to get back to where we started and talk about this.
Yeah, I'm always spreading myself. I'm sorry.
Canadiens, Capitals. What do you see? How does the series play out?
Well, I like the way the Habs came back in Game 1. I think that I kind of foresaw the little bit of lack of confidence, I would say, in the early part of the game. I love the way they came back. I guess that out of that, they have to learn to play a full 60 minutes. They have to learn to be desperate as of the first face-off. And that's not only for this series, Aaron and Bill. It's if you want to grow as a team, you have to know to be ready at the proper moment. So we'll see where this series goes. But in the meantime, I like the way they battled back on game one.
Did they win this series?
I think they could win this series. I think the Capitals knows that. There are so many intangibles. Is that the right word?
Okay.
Yeah.
Especially in the first round, so many intangibles.
And where's the pressure, anyways?
Well, there you go, Bill. That's one of them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
where the big surprises come from in playoffs the last 20 years, they come in the first round mainly. So yeah, they can still do it.
Toronto will vouch for that.
Well, I thought Ottawa would be a better opposition. Ottawa came close in game two. But I think that, yeah.
Can you leave us on one note so the fans who are going to miss this your call, le tir, le but?
But you have to build it up, you know.
Okay, well,
so it starts. Alors, you want to be involved in my call?
You do it.
Alors, Bill Brownstein est en zone défensive.
Oh, man,
Regarde
man,
devant
je pense
lui.
pas.
Aaron Rand est en échappé. La passe revient à Rand, voilà, en zone offensive devant le gardien. Le tir et le but!
I scored.
Aaron scored.
Rand sur un jeu magnifique de Bill Brownstein.
Oh, I messed.
Nice pass. Pierre, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for
really
the
appreciate
invitation.
Seeing you and wish you all the best.
Thank you so
A
much.
Grand Prix, se vient.
Grand Prix, c'est Et on roule, and yeah, it's coming in June, and it's a great era
Yeah.
for Formula
We're going to have to
One.
bring you back to talk about Grand Prix.
Well, I'll be ready for that.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
that wraps
Merci.
up another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I want to thank our guest, Pierre Houde. We'll see you again soon.